Well, that's awesome. Let's begin our conversation looking back on your long career. And as I said at the onset, you and I have known each other for more than 2 decades. And how did you get your start in this industry? We talked a little bit about you being a foot soldier in retail, but there's probably a touch point in your career where you said to yourself, I want to be in this. Was it a first record? Was it your first stereo? Was it somebody influencing you on this kind of thing? Where does the journey for David Solomon begin?
The journey for me began when I was, I don't know, maybe 15 or maybe 14, 15, when one of my dad's friends dragged us up to his listening room, and he turned on his Macintosh amplifiers and Bozak speakers, and we were listening to some classical thing. I don't know. I was not into classical at that time at all, but I sat back, and he was educating us on just sound quality, and what you could get out of a hi-fi. Me coming from a Magnavox, that was our high-end system, right? In our house, it was a Magnavox console with hey, not two, but four speakers built into this thing. No tweeters. It was just you heard what you heard. You heard the basic, sort of generalities of songs. And I absolutely fell in love with music way, way early on. But when I heard this system, all of a sudden I could hear extension on the top end, and bottom end that I could feel in my chest. And it literally changed my life forever. It's like, I want this. This is something that I need for myself. And then I'd wanted one, but really couldn't afford one. So, I ended up saving up as much money as I could and bought a little pair of, I don't know, I think they were like little Advent speakers and a Sansui receiver. And just, I thought I was just the king of the hill when I had this kind of stuff. It wasn't really very good at all, but at least when John Bonham hit a cymbal, I could tell it was a cymbal, not just sort of have to imagine it was there. So that's sort of how I got my start in it. And then when I think I was about 20, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, I was just literally looking for a job. So I see this advertisement in this for this company called CMC. I go in and apply, and I started working for. It's got to be the worst hi-fi company that has ever existed on planet Earth. It might not have been quite as bad as Crazy Eddie's, but I can't think that the ethics would have been any better. So it was really not a great experience, other than I got to play music for people all day, and I could not believe how cool that was. I did that for a couple of years, and then went to work for a really, really cool company in Atlanta called Hi-Fi Buys. And that's when I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe people are paying me to do this. I mean, I would have literally done this for free. I was having such a good time. And so I worked for those guys for a long time, and finally ended up leaving the company and opening my own company. This was like in 1984. I opened up my first company, which was called Prestige Audio Video. You didn't even know this, Bess.
No,
It was the very first.
this is the first time for me. I'm
Yeah.
reading your resume, sir. Tell me about your career.
So it's a company called Prestige, and it was maybe the very first custom audio video dealer in the United States. I don't think anybody was doing custom at that point. That was pre everything. I had to design switching systems and make in-wall speakers and put them in the wall and that kind of thing. So I did that for a little while, got really tired of working 90 hours a week. Hi-Fi Buys bought my business back from me, and I went to work for them as their talent acquisition and training director. So I did that for about maybe 10 years. And then you and I met. I went to work for Monitor Audio. I was tired of the retail side. I wanted to see what the wholesale side looked like. So I went to work for a company called Monitor Audio, who was actually doing no business in America at that point, or very little. And as you know, we took those guys and just made up a really great company. I was working for a company called Kevro at that point. And then we brought a company in called Musical Fidelity.
Mm.
which was kind of fun, except the owner was totally morally bankrupt.
The
And as you know,
opinions
not
expressed on this program are not necessarily those. Never mind.
after that, we didn't really know how bankrupt he was, and so my partner and myself, Jim Spainhour, we opened a company called Signal Path and started um, distributing musical Fidelity for a little while until we just couldn't take the pain anymore. And we finally ended up opening a company called Peachtree Audio, which I'll tell you about in a little while. Did Peachtree for a long time. And really, we think we changed the industry with that product. And then it was off to Tidal, which was an incredible experience. Loved working for the first company that delivered full resolution to the United States because that had never happened before. And I did that for about a year until Jay-Z bought it. And a couple years later, I was working with Qobuz, which as their chief high-res music evangelist.
Oh, I
And
know
this
the
has
evangel.
been like, it
The
feels like everything that I've done in my life has led up to the moment that I went to work for Qobuz.
I think it's a great story. And to think that I've watched your journey from monitor audio to musical fidelity when I first joined Music Direct, to the start of Signal Path and the introduction of the Peachtree Audio amplifier and component line, to where we are now, two companies both specializing in the early stages of high resolution streaming, now more in full vogue and in full peak than ever before. You've obviously worked every avenue of the high end, as you've explained here. And but one of the things that I want to ask as we progress in this conversation is, we know that all the high school audiophiles have a little bit of trouble embracing newer technology. So there is that subset of consumer that we want to help out, and we want to.
Yeah, you said who? I'm sorry.
I'm saying that the old school audiophiles, the people that have done their best to be as forward in the audio world, but they need a little hand holding, as it were. And there are also some that are just simply resistant to change. They just want to hang on to physical media as their bread and butter of listening to music. How, when you started to experience the art of streaming music, um, which at the time was very early on. We can look back at Napster and all the other to-dos of trying to play audio. How did you get to the point where streaming was going to be the game changer for you and me, and for people today?
It was a while for me. I had to have my heart broken 3 or 4 times. So my first dive into the whole streaming thing had nothing to do with streaming over the air, or from the cloud. It was streaming from a hard drive. A lot of us have gone through that, right? We want to burn all of our CDs into our system. So I did that, and of course I did that for, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years. And I had a couple hard drives crash on me, and it just broke my heart because even if you were super, super smart like me and did a backup, you're not nearly as smart as you thought you were. No, I wasn't, because my perfect backup, I can remember the first time I had to transfer that back to a hard drive that I was using, or the music system that I was using back then, which I think at that point was iTunes. All the metadata got screwed up, and I must have spent like 6 months or so just trying to get the metadata right again. And then, okay, I'm back, I'm whole, and burning in more CDs, and I just think I'm the coolest guy in the world. And all of a sudden, my hard drive breaks again, and it's the same thing. It was just a total heartbreaker. So that was my first dive into streaming, where you could take something like this and control your music. I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And really thought, oh my gosh, this is actually where everything is going. I didn't bother with Napster. I didn't bother with any of those setups. I didn't do BitTorrents or anything, because the quality of the music was just so bad. It was like, why even bother? So I bypassed all of that. I didn't even think about streaming until one day in 2000, I think it was 2006, maybe 2007. This was as we were opening up Peachtree Audio. This service called MOG came out. Do you remember that?
Yeah, totally.
MOG, a good buddy of mine, David Hyman. He wasn't a buddy then, but he is now. Opened up this service. This was before Spotify, and it was a 320 kilobit per second uh, streaming. And I turn it on, and I'm going, wow, this doesn't sound bad. I still yeah, I think it's kind of funny when you hear some of the audio files or people that rent great systems or listen to SACD or whatever. They go, Spotify sucks or Mog sucks. It doesn't suck. It's a crap load better than FM ever was, right? I mean, it really didn't sound bad. It wasn't something that I would use for reference. But when I started using that program, and I still remember the first time I used it, I just totally flipped out. I put on my headphones. I'm walking into Kroger, and I start streaming a Paul Simon album. And it was like, this is so much better than the system that they had in the grocery store. And I could pick out my own stuff. And I was thinking, wow, this is incredible. I think the next day I called my partner. I said, Jim, this is going to go to 1644. It's not going to stop here. We need to get really good at streaming right now because it's not going to stop here. And everybody's going, well, it is going to stop here. We don't have the bandwidth. We don't have the space. We don't have the speed. We didn't have anything back then other than, kind of tipping the ability of the internet to do, 320 kilobits per second with MOG. It would do that, but even back then it wasn't that easy. But it was starting to get easy to see what the future was going to look like. So it did come true. There was 1644 streaming, and I met these guys in Munich when I was with AudioQuest for a stint, and I was just totally enamored with the company, with Tidal. And guys, if you're ever looking for managing director in the United States, let me know. Well, within, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 months, we had made the deal. And we started streaming 1644 here. So the vision of being able to stream full bit finally came true. And we were kind of off to the races. So that's how I sort of started and continued in the streaming world.
And I think one of the great things is that you have become, besides evangelist, which has so many broad connotations for some people, I think you have become, in my professional estimation, a mentor, a guide path for people who want to be able to understand the skill set that it takes, which isn't very much. Have a computer, have a good piece of equipment to really make sure that you have everything that's going on. Let me throw this question to you, since we're now sort of walking along this path together. You're uniquely qualified to answer this question because you've been on both the hardware and electronic side and the software and music side of this equation now for many years. How does increased bandwidth in our homes, the better sounding digital to analog converters, or DACs as we also call it, available to our music listeners, whether it's products that are out there that are made by many people, including those that we support at Music Direct, and now the standard for higher bit rates has changed the landscape of streaming. You talked about 1644 is then the new height, but since then it's gotten even higher. How does that play into the equation?
Yeah, well, for a company like Qobuz to even really exist, the bandwidth would have really had to have increased. So from, say, in the last 10 years, bandwidth has just greatly increased. We were I'm trying to remember the date. It seems like it was about 5 years ago. We were at an average of 2.4 megabits per second. That's what United States households had. So you really pretty much had to be using a compressed music streaming service if you were going to listen to music. Today, I just checked this out, and we're at an average in the United States of over 50 megabits per second, which is more than enough to stream, up to 24, 192 files. The files that you used to have to pay like, 30, 40, $50 for, we've got, 2 million cuts of that stuff that you can just stream just as a part of the service. You have to realize that we have in the United States, as of about 2018, I don't know what the stat is now, but about a $250 billion internet infrastructure in the United States. And it's just getting better and better and better all the time. I heard you talking about jackhammers a few minutes outside of your door, and I'm going, wonder if they're installing fiber, because they're installing fiber everywhere. So when I first went to Scandinavia, these guys were all going, oh, yes, we have 1,000 up, 1,000 down. I'm going, God, that's just a dream for us, because that was back in 2014, right? And now I've got 1,000 up, 1,000 down. I am loving the internet these days. But the speed helps you have enough headroom to have more bandwidth than you really need. So yeah, having plenty of headroom is great when you're listening to music. However, when you're listening to things like Qobuz, I absolutely suggest that you hardwire your system. Use an Ethernet if at all possible. If not, you may or may not have great results. Me, not so much. We've got a big house, and I tried to do this wirelessly when I started with Qobuz, and I was getting some skips and some stops and starts, which drove me crazy.
Yeah.
So I'm going, this is nuts. So I just start wiring the whole house with Ethernet, and
Sure, you were the
now
the family as you're like going up through ductwork and stuff.
well, remember in 1984, I had the first custom company in the United States. I
Well,
actually
yes,
know how to
that's true.
do that stuff. Yeah, I can fish walls all day long. That's no problem at all.
That should be a natural for you. I agree with you in terms of lessons learned as we've watched the industry uh, give us telephony and other bandwidth capabilities. Here in Chicago, when I hunkered down this past March, one of the first things I had to do was do a full recheck of my entire computer networking system here. I had very limited. I ignored my home network for a long time simply because my world was in my office and in our listening rooms. So when it came time for me to come home and set up my room, my Qobuz, my Tidal, the first thing that went horribly wrong was the fact that my router was just being completely uncooperative. But that was also due to the fact that the product was in the Pleistocene age. I hadn't changed it in about 10 years. So switching over to a new high G style router, learning to throw my hard drive of iTunes saved ALAC files and throwing it into the network with Rune, and ultimately using Qobuz and Tidal as my ports of reference has been very, very exciting. But I also agree with you. Wiring is a much better standard. Yes, it does mean wires, unless of course the mesh network is absolutely spot on. But even those people that I've spoken to who have mesh networks and are using devices that rely on high bandwidth download and or upstreaming of music, that they also have their share of burps as well. So yeah, I think that's a to do in that regard. Let's follow up on the subject of high-res music services. In my time at Music Direct, whenever I'm talking to our customers on the phone, as are my colleagues when they're checking in or emailing us, one of the big questions is that, is it worth the advantage to actually subscribe to or become part of a high-res service? The argument that we've used over the years is basically, well, they're here now, and while record labels like MoFi, sister company for Music Direct, are still churning out software, whether it's on the 12-inch LP format or even an SACD when it becomes available, There are those who still think that I'm happiest with that, but the cost per month is equal to even more than buying a CD or an SACD. And I think you get tens, thousands of albums, songs, and whatnot. Can you tell us in your own words what you see as the biggest draw for high-res streaming, and what you think is the best way for companies like Music Direct, retailers, and whatnot to help convince customers to try it for themselves? Where are those? Where are those talking points for us to work with?
Look, it's so cheap now. It's crazy not to do it. I could see it when it was 25 bucks a month to do this. But it's no longer nearly that. We in November we just dropped our pricing down to $15 a month. And all of a sudden, we start seeing people from Apple and from Google and from Pandora and all of these sites that are much, less quality. But now these people are starting to become at least high-res curious. I guess that would be a good way to say it. And really, a lot of that's due to our friend at Amazon, Jeff Bezos, who made the
Never
first
met the
move,
man.
right?
Don't know who he is. I think I might have saw him at a lunch line some years ago.
So at any rate, this guy puts his thumb on businesses on a daily basis and puts them out of business, right? So we were like $25 a month for high res streaming, which for over 2 million cuts of high res, to me, that's still an extraordinary deal. But we thought, okay, look, this guy he's going to try, he's trying to put us out of business. So our management went back to the labels, renegotiated our deals, and we were able to meet that price. Well, if you know anything about Amazon, they can piss off enough people to keep you in business. So we've got even people from Amazon that were, Amazon listeners coming over to Qobuz. So there's a whole nother realm of people that are coming into high-end audio. And for people that are already in audio, uh, there is there a choice? I mean, do they can you get your music any less expensive or have nearly the quantity? And of course, the answer is no. When I was with Peachtree, I would I would talk to people about high res streaming. It's like really the only way to do this is burn it into your system because there's really nothing available. But now the whole world has changed, and not only do we dwarf your collection of regular CDs, but we would certainly dwarf your collection of high res. So if you're buying better gear, why would you buy better gear if you weren't utilizing higher resolution um, material? And then if you're one of those guys that go, oh, I've got 2,000 CDs and that's plenty. I've got news for you. You are not even scratching the surface. It's amazing how much old and new music that's available now in high resolution that you do not own. There's no way you could own it because first off, I don't know, I've never been to a house that could fit that much material in there. If I'm buying physical stuff these days, honestly, I'm usually buying albums. And if I can't buy the album, I'm buying a download, something to support the artist as much as possible.
Yeah.
So now instead of, we used to spend so much money on music, Bess, right? We would go, I know me, I would get my mom to drive me to the record store after about age 12, and every week I would buy two. And if I had a good grass cutting week, I might buy three albums. And after a while, you build up a nice little collection, and you have to replace them every now and then. But if you're into if you're into high-end audio or even mid-fi audio these days, because mid-fi is actually pretty darn good, it's nuts not to have a high-resolution streaming service. And there are three. There's us, Qobuz. We do up to 24/192. Amazon does the same. But we're better because we really are the music lovers, and we're not selling, diapers and dog food. We're selling music. That's what we do. And then there's Tidal that does 1644, and then of course MQA. So there's lots of choices to be made out there from about 15 to 20 bucks a month. You can get incredible amount of high resolution.
That's almost equal to the cost of us enjoying everything from Netflix to Amazon Prime, depending upon the level of service that you want and the number of households that are going to be watching it. But that what makes the enjoyment of services, as you just stated, and I use this for my own time in quarantine, is that the scope of titles that I had over 2,000 discs on my hard drive by the time I stopped doing down ripping a couple of years ago, and my collection was still growing. In fact, it still is. I still get CDs from time to time whenever I go to a U shop here in Chicago, or get some promo copies occasionally from time to time from our labels that still give away promos for us to look at. But as I've learned when I'm using Qobuz or when I'm using Tidal, is that the way that they choose to curate their titles after a certain song comes in, it's great because it almost stays within the course of the theme of what it is that I'm listening to. So if I'm feeling memorable, like I want to listen to Cat Stevens, and I have there's a 2496 of T for the Tillerman, for example, and it decodes beautifully. That sounds really great. Then it wants to shuffle on over to a Crosby, Stills and Nash song. That's really where the fun begins, because you learn things or B-sides of a track that you probably haven't listened to since your childhood, and it's an eye opener. And the same would hold true, and you can agree with me on this, I think, is that when a new release kicks, it focuses on that generational listening angle. So if it's a new Lord track or something like that, and then bam, goes into a track similar to her and her performances, it's really been escapist for me. Yeah, it does cause problems for me work wise, but I I digress. All right, onward. Um, you've talked about the service, you've talked about its capabilities, you've talked about the cost. Now it comes to the question of, what do I hook it up to? Now, at Music Direct, we've been proud to carry dozens and dozens of different products that cover the gamut of traditional audio to the latest generation network audio players and music streamers. But that's just one component, okay? If you were to put on your salesman hat back in the days of hi-fi buys, and you were to say to a customer coming into the office for the first time, or coming into the store for the first time, as they would to me, what uh, you know what can you say to them about what it is that they need to do to get the best sound now that they've got this service in their hand? It isn't just it's no longer a computer. It needs to be a computer, and it needs to be a server, and it needs to be something that's all in one. But not all of our customers may have that bandwidth to work with that. Do you have suggestions for all-in-one boxes that just plug in and get cracking? We can talk about a certain company called Sonos that helped revolutionize that, but they still have to be hooked up. What are your thoughts on that?
There's so many ways to do this anyway. I tell you, the easiest. I'm trying to. If you just start from the bottom and kind of work your way up, there's a lot of ways to do this that people don't even realize. Like, you probably already have a server right now that you're just not using. What do you mean? I don't have a Sonos. I don't have a Blue Sound. I don't have a. Most people have got one of these, right?
Yep.
It's not a bad way to start. And it doesn't, especially for a lot of audiophiles, you would think, oh my God, you're not putting a phone in my system. Here's the thing, you probably got an old iPhone or Android laying around. You can pull up Qobuz super, super easy on this thing, and it can actually sound really good. You can actually get up to like 2496 out of an iPhone if you use a little device like this. You know what that is?
That, for our friends who don't know,
Am I
is
focused?
the AudioQuest Dragonfly Cobalt, the latest generation of ultra small, high performance DACs.
Right. They make one of these that are in a black. I think it starts for about $100.
Right.
They make a red, which is I think two, and I think this one's three. If you could spend $100 on a little DAC and you've got a phone, you have got an absolute killer system. And I'll tell you how I know this. I do, these flash DJ sessions that I do at the Shows Fest. So I do these for like all kinds of companies, but instead of having them, many times the hotels don't even have internet service, right? So I'll carry around my iPad and one of these guys just in case, because I always have a ton of music downloaded on it, right? I've always got a lot of Qobuz downloaded on here. So I'll walk into John DeVore was probably the most fun that I went with, only because he's looking at me like I'm an alien or something when he said, well, how do you want to do this? I go, well, just out of the iPad. He goes, Dave, this is like a $250,000 system. I'm not sure that an iPad is really appropriate. Look, John, let me play a tune. And then, if it doesn't sound good, just tell me and I'll stop. So we start playing music, and everybody in the room, especially when I tell them what I'm listening to, drops their jaw, including John, and they just go, keep going, keep going. Well, these things, I do this with $250,000 systems on a routine basis, and nobody's ever said anything but incredible things. But then you can start stepping up or doing other things, like Sonos is probably the largest. They probably got the largest number of boxes that are actually streaming right now. Currently, they're limited to 1644. But there's talk in the industry about those guys. I think there have been some press releases and whatnot that they're talking about going to 24-bit. One of my least expensive and favorite devices is the Blue Sound Node 2i. And the reason I dig that is because it does high res all over the place. You could have as many rooms doing high res as the number of units you've got. And they're only like $500 a piece, I think. So they're a little more than the Sonos, but they do perform a good bit better from a high res standpoint. And then from there, gosh, there's so many of these guys out there. The little Pro-Ject box is incredible. I just read a review on their little renderer, and I cannot wait to get that thing in. I think that's about $850. I've also got an Auralic, Aries, an Arender X100 or N100. It's just sitting right here. Gosh, I've got so many, I can't even think of how many I've got. But if you're looking for a streamer, they're super, super easy to find. And if you call a place like Music Direct, these guys are real experts on this kind of stuff, and they can help you pick out one based on the kind of system that you've got now.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that, because I think one of the things that we've learned through experiences with you guys, as well as every one of our brand partners that checks in with us, we make it our business to stay ahead of the curve in knowing what's going on. If we don't, we go right back to the manufacturer and saying, hey, we could use a little handhold on this and help us through this process, because, well, we're only human. You mentioned other models. Yeah, the Pro-Ject, no question. I'm absolutely a huge fan of that. One of my favorite pieces of the moment that I've been liking to recommend in the all-in-one category is the NAD M10.
Yeah, that's a killer piece. I just
This
did
little wonder is just beyond anything I've ever heard for the price. It's spectacular. Also, if someone doesn't want those kind of huge player deals and they just want something that's already on there, David, you probably recall of the unfortunate news that Oppo said bye-bye to making physical players with built-in streamers and network audio players. So the death of the BDP 105 was heard like a shot around the world. But when people ask us at Music Direct what is the player that might have some of those bennies, right now my favorite is going to be the Arcam 50.
That's a great piece.
This player is half machine, half half streamer, and with its RPlay platform, it's really just a breeze to deal with. But for people who still have the physical discs, both SACD and CD, you really can't go wrong with that kind of a design. So certainly stuff like that has made it going through. Of course, you've been with Qobuz. 2014, I think, was your hire date there, David. Am I correct then, or am I wrong?
2014 was Tidal. 2018
18. Okay, right. So
was Qobuz.
so Qobuz for the past couple of years, you've grown with the company. I've watched it grow. I've watched it mature. A couple of things I've noticed. Unlike Tidal, they've taken into kind of making an organic relationship with its listeners, more face to face, more feel, especially here with the USA relationship. And my question to you is, why is Qobuz so different? What have you learned from it versus your time over at Tidal that gives you the bandwidth to say to customers like us that this is the kind of service to invest in?
Really quite a few things. Aside from what we put into the service for music lovers, like panoramas and magazines and articles and things that you just don't find all in one place. And we've just got tons of stuff like that. We do our own writing. We've got a lady in New York. She's like a music encyclopedia. Her name is Sujan Hong, and she does a lot of our writing and curating of our playlists. You may remember a guy from Stereophile, Robert Baird. Do
Yes,
you remember him?
I
He
do. Yeah,
does a lot of
absolutely.
our writing now too. So we've got all of these music writers that, their whole life has been devoted to music and learning about music. And these are the folks that are teaching us. These are the people that are writing this stuff down on a daily basis and putting up exclusive material on Qobuz that you just literally don't see anywhere else. It really gives you an opportunity to learn a lot more about the artists than you can in most places without having to go to a lot of different sources. The other couple of things that I really think that sets us apart, we have a download store, but our download store it's so good. If you are a download person, Qobuz is the place to download. Because first off, I was just looking today. In fact, I sent you a couple of slides a little while ago. Do you know which ones I'm talking about? The
Vaguely,
one
I
with
apologize. When you're
it's
ramping up
okay.
for when you're ramping up for a show, it's you got to roll fast with your information. So
Right. So at any rate, I just did a search today on one of my favorite old jazz albums, Kenny Burrell Midnight Hour, and on Qobuz you can buy it for, I think it's $20.99. On HD Tracks it's $24.99. But they do have a 20% sale. Ours are always less expensive. But if you're a Sublime Plus member with Qobuz, um, you'll be able to buy that download for, I think it's $10.99, and Hi-Res at 24,192. $10.99. We used to pay 30, $40 for a recording like that in Hi-Res. And so anything available on Qobuz to listen to is also available to purchase as well. But instead of being, like retail plus 10, it's really, really nice discounts.
and
So that's
here's
sort
what's
of
on the screen to show everybody what the story is in terms of the
so
rate.
why do I think that's so
Right.
right. And the reason that I think that's such a big deal is because now more than ever, artists need our support. Buy their downloads, even if you don't need it. I mean, I know that you can stream it. Some people just like to buy downloads, and we've got a pretty healthy business there. But when you buy someone's download, the artists are paid more like they're buying, like you bought a CD or an album than off of a stream. Because frankly, everybody knows you just don't make a lot of money on streaming. So we try to also do programs whenever we possibly can that really help the artists. Like a couple months ago, we did one called "Gimme Shelter." Maybe it's a month ago, where all of the proceeds to all of the downloads that we sold went right back to the artists and rights holders, so that they actually could make a good bit more money on that. We got so many nice letters well wishes from the artist because we did that. But we're always trying to think of what's the next way we can help with a leg up to the artist. I don't know many other people that are doing that, many other streaming services that are doing that. If they are, at least they don't talk about it. You do have people like Bandcamp that are doing stuff like that that are really, really artist support based. But as far as streaming services go, you don't find those guys doing that kind of thing. Another thing you don't find them doing, and we are the only ones, and I'm super, super proud of it, we support the industry. If you go to our hi-fi partners page on Qobuz,
Hmm.
you can see dozens of playlists and logos from companies like, I don't know, Jail Audio and Clips and Music Direct isn't up there yet, but I've got a really, really killer one from Best. What's it called, Best?
It is called
Best
Best
Fest.
Fest.
Best
Uh,
Fest,
yeah.
which I just listened to that the other day. Best made one. In fact, this is going to be one of the playlists that I recommend to you guys today, and I'm going to have all of these posted on Streaming Music Matters. If you're not a member of Streaming Music Matters, it's a Qobuz fan page. It's really like a streaming and Qobuz fan page because there's a ton of information that we try to deliver to people that make streaming, or our goal is to just really make streaming as easy as possible. Or if there are questions that people have that are like, they think they're completely remedial questions. We just had one about, how do I hook up an Ethernet the other day? They're not. Nobody ever does anything other than go, hey, let me get you the information that you need to make your experience better. So we'll have those published. We'll have those published on Streaming Music Matters right after this event. And then Bess, I'll send you those links as well so that you can publish those on
Absolutely.
music.
After this feed, we'll definitely make sure that all the links are there. We'll also share my link of Best Fest, which is a continuing, evolving story of music in so many different ways. Who knows? You'll hear a speech from Casablanca. Suddenly, you'll be thrown into the world of electronica, or a moment of Beethoven for clarity and for some dynamic effects. If you're going to just demo the heck out of your system, it's a wide-ranging formula of music. And as I said to David when we were talking about, you had said to me offline, and like, my God, this is huge. My first reaction is, yeah, well, I'm constantly adding to it. Why take something out that isn't going to be, memorable or so forth? But what makes that list fun is, in my previous work as a broadcaster, it's always being great to have a playlist when you're on air. But what if you just simply hit the shuffle? And if you hit the shuffle, the journey is even more interesting. So nothing's curated to such a point where it's Harry Belafonte this for 2 minutes, and Joan Baez or whatever in this format. It could be Harry Belafonte followed by Thievery Corporation, followed by a piece by Edo DeVart in San Francisco Orchestra. It's a throw of the dice as to what journey goes on when you're looking at playlists, whether they're 10 songs or 20 songs. Also, I should point out, Music Direct is part of the Qobuz Society. This was a group of retailers and manufacturers that Qobuz has graciously asked us to join, to show our love and our cred for the Qobuz brand and its service. And in the next couple of weeks, Music Direct will also have its own special curated list. In fact, we'll be announcing one probably this month. And when that happens, you'll be the first to know, either on our Facebook or social media feeds. We'll also certainly be announcing it during one of our conversations broadcasts in the near future. David, onward.
Now, hold on, buddy. Before we go further,
Please.
I've got a question for you based on reality, because vinyl has gotten super, super big these days.
Uh-huh.
I was just talking to Michael Fremer the other day, and I'm going, Michael, and I'd like to do the same thing from you. But we get in the middle of the conversation. I'm going, I gotta know, man, because you never really talk about it. I know you have Qobuz because I see, your streams and whatnot. How do you use Qobuz? Because I know you're such a vinyl nut. He goes, well, anytime I'm not around my turntable, which is a lot, right? And anytime I want to find new music, he's going, and that's what I do too. I find new music in it if I'm really into it. Like there's so many good ones. I won't even start in on choices, but I can call a place like Music Direct and go, hey, I want this on vinyl. Oh my God, you've got that on MoFi in vinyl? I'll take that, right? I mean, it's such a great way to discover what you're going to buy on vinyl, don't you think?
Yeah, and there's no other way to speak the volumes about what Music Direct has done in the 25 years that I've been there, and for the company's legacy that goes beyond 3 decades, is that when we first started there, vinyl was all that we had. Yes, there were CDs, and CDs were still very prevalent, and to some extent we still sell that format. But since the early 2000s, I think it's been safe to say that vinyl as a format is now more universal than ever before. And one of the reasons for that is that for us as a business, there's been an outgrowth of vinyl in the tens of hundreds of units every year. It represents more than half of our business as a market for customers throughout the United States, and to people who are buying software titles, whether it be from our sister brand Mobile Fidelity or any of our other brands that we've been proud to offer for worldwide sale. If a record needs to be sent to Australia, let's get it to Australia, because they fell in love with it, and they felt that the U.S. pressing was more their speed as opposed to whatever they got in some other country. But as to the question of using services like Qobuz as a starting point to curate, there isn't a moment when I'm looking at my iPad as you are now, or my phone when I should be safely driving and then I come to a stop. When a song comes on, take a snapshot immediately so that I can begin to contact my people in our software buying unit and go, John, is this in print? If so, I want a copy. And that's kind of the journey that I have. And I also have to say, as you so rightly pointed out, the curated lists that are out there, whether it's through the Qobuz Society members or just people, you have curators within the Qobuz family. Those lists are so dynamic, so interesting that you have no choice but to listen to 30 tracks in one sitting. You want to know what's going on. And
I did yours yesterday. I listened to the whole thing.
it's over 5 days worth of listening. Come on.
No, it's not 5 days. I turned it on yesterday afternoon when I got it, and it never went off. It was fantastic. I really like it, but it's kind of like you. It's mostly quite mellow, quite kind of best mellow.
Yeah, I'm into the. There's a great story there. We're over at Wrigley Field for a business trip with a well-known credit card company, and we had an opportunity to get into one of the skyboxes to watch a game in which the Cubs lost. But that's another story. But when I was approached by one of the senior people within this group and munching on a hot dog, they were like, "So, Bess, what do you listen to?" And I had to look at myself, turn my head and looked at Jim Davis, the owner of our company, and then we both turned, and because Jim was also asked the same question, we sort of looked at them and said, "We like EDM," and they all started to giggle, like, "Really?" And going, and then I had to say, "Well, I'm a little bit more of the chill and acid jazz kind of guy. I like things that are a little bit more ethereal, a little bit more minimalist, things that sort of motivate and sort of give you this deep groove that you do nothing but sort of dance around the living room, as opposed to sit in front of your stereo and go, I'm all turned on by it." But yeah, that's the scope of my list, as is some of the lists that I've chosen on Qobuz to check out. There's always that wonderful piece, very. If there's a way for me to give my cred to Qobuz, since we're riffing like this, is that it's very artsy. It's not laced with epic amounts of highfalutin, over-the-top artists that we know are out there. Yeah, that's great. We're all hip to that. But I want to know about somebody from France. I want to know about somebody from Sweden. I want to know about somebody from Japan. And they somehow pop up in those lists. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful, because that also adds to that little snapshot job that says, I got to find this tune. Do we have it? Can I get it from somebody? Is it in vinyl? Those journeys make it even more exciting for myself, and also for customers that I've talked to that have said, I use Qobuz and other services to look for this title, I need to know if it's in vinyl because I want to be able to play it on my turntable as much as you do. So, there.
Yeah, you can kind of make it look like anything you want to, especially when you first start, because you're asked, one of the first things you're asked to do is pick out your favorite genres, and you can always add and take away from those things. But whatever you have checked, that's what's going to be, that's what's going to be showing on your screen. So if you want it to look like Tidal, just click hip hop. We are there because the only thing you're going to see is hip hop selections. But on the other hand, if you're only into classical, that's what you'll see. Or if you're into classical and jazz or whatever genres you like, those are the genres that you see when you open up the app, which is that's the way it should be. The best music in the world. What is it?
Whatever you want to hear is my book.
It's
What is it?
whatever you like.
It's whatever you like.
That's
That's
it.
really
So
that
that's what
simple.
you see when you open your system. You should see what you like.
We have less than 30 seconds left. If people want to begin the journey into Qobuz, what do they have to do?
It's easy. You can go to Qobuz.com. There's a free 30-day trial that you can check out. The 30-day trial will allow you to have all of our music and up to 24 192 resolutions so that you can check it out. So here's the bad thing. If you do check it out, watch out because it's going to be really, really hard to go back, especially if you're listening for sound quality.
David Solomon, Qobuz USA, Chief Evangelist. You, my friend, we've used up our hour. I cannot believe it.
Me either. It seems like it's just starting.
Yeah, we have so much more questions too. It's dreadful. I know that other people may have been asking, and to them we apologize for our inability to get to them. So hopefully next time we'll do something like this in a little bit more of a different vein, and perhaps get to you guys as well. David Solomon, Qobuz USA, thank you so much. Join us tomorrow, Bill Lowe from Audio Quest. He's at a special time, 2 p.m. Central, right here on Facebook Live. And if you missed any of this, we're going to keep it on our Facebook Live page under our videos, but also we'll be transporting it over to YouTube for those of you who want to see this in its entirety. For all of us at Music Direct and musicdirect.com, thanks so much for watching. We will talk to you in the very near future, as in tomorrow. So hang in there.